Hi, I'm James Cox of SilverMoneyFuture. I'm here in Singapore at silverbullion.com with Gregor Gregersen. Gregor, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Glad you came.
Thank you. So we're here with your centerpiece in your new office with all the silver. Can you talk us through some of the things that we've got here?
Yes. Now, as you might know, we are a company in Singapore that specializes in physical bullion, especially silver, hence the name, silver bullion. Yes, the display here in the middle, you will see a little pyramid. These are 100-ounce chambers. Okay. About 3.1 kg each.
That's Johnson Matthey.
Johnson Matthey. And this is part of our central display. On the left side, you see various first mint coins. We are a friendly distributor of the first mint. And these are the most popular coins. The large ones tend to be quite good for investment because the per ounce price is very low. It's a lot cheaper to make a 1 kg coin than to make 30 small coins.
Right, okay.
Towards the right side, you see the typical investment coin. So you have the Marble Leaf. You have the American Eagle. The American Eagle is probably the most popular investment coin. This was in the past. You have the Vienna Philharmonica, which started around 2008, which was a European. And then you have the Libertad, which are the Mexican coins. And I should add, Libertads have a lot of history because...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a historical coin.
Yes. It's the same thing. It's created pieces of 8, which are well known from the Pirates of the Caribbean and so on and so on.
Okay.
And it was the foundation of the first worldwide currency, which was based on silver, actually.
The Mexican dollar, which went all around the world.
It's a Spanish Empire, a Spanish piece of 8, which was informally adopted or used by England as well. The term was based by the German thaler, which was the foundation of the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, the Filipino coins, South American coins of the years, as well as even the Chinese yuan.
Wow.
1913 actually was based on the 1 ounce.
Historical indeed. And here we have got...
Yes, it's the centerpiece. It's a 10 kg coin. This was the first mint. It's a lunar coin. It's the year of the dragon here in Asia.
Fantastic. Is that a lucky year?
For me it is.
Okay, great.
I was born in the year of the dragon. So.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, we won't ask your age. Just with relation to these coins representing real money, whether it's the peso or the Mex or the Spanish dollar or the US dollar, it's all related to money. And earlier we were talking about the US dollar. In your opinion, is the US dollar and other paper money forms, is it going to see 2020? Will we still be using paper money in 2020, or will it prove itself to be useless?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I think that we are going to see some changes. We'll probably still have some form of paper money throughout the future, but the question is, are we going to keep on having a purely fiat system whereby your money is based only on the full faith and credit of some country, if they are very indebted, which the US is, the most indebted country in the history of the world, or just about any measure.
Sure.
And they keep on printing more and more money. And the person printing these, Ben Bernanke, has said himself that by printing more of these, you're reducing the real value of your debt, because as you create more money, more currency, the amount of debt that I'm owing you is being reduced, because inflation reduces the real value of the debt. So as we keep on doing this, at some point the creditors might no longer be willing to put up with it. And one of the biggest creditors, I mean, they're Asians, basically, let's say the Chinese, if they no longer want to put up with this, then what's going to happen? Because ultimately, the last person holding US dollars will be the biggest loser.
Sure.
And of course, you can argue that the Chinese are shooting themselves in the foot if they were to start selling dollars because they have so many of them, they would lose a lot of money. But at the same time, as more and more this is being printed, I think everybody is starting to put more and more of their real wealth into other things, into real assets. And gold and silver are some of the few monetary assets which cannot be printed because they're physical.
Okay.
And they have been around for 5,000 years. It is the standard commodity to which people go back when confidence is being lost.
And do you see that as being likely, a return to gold and silver within a decade?
I believe that its role will become much bigger than it is now.
Okay. As a monetary value?
As a monetary value and as a way of enforcing restraints. And as a way of basing currency on something other than just the face that people have in a currency. Sure. Because it starts being abused. Once you lose confidence in a currency, there's no turning back. At that point, you're going to have hyperinflation. You're going to have what happened in Germany in 1923. And that can happen very quickly. And the only way to get out of this is to make a new currency and base it on something real. And traditionally, something real is gold and silver.
Yeah.
And we are still going to have some aspect of paper through history because there's a certain need of flexibility and so on. But we need to have restraints. Okay. And such restraint is probably going to pull from gold and silver because throughout every country, throughout the whole of history, gold and silver was accepted as a need. Whenever you had a war, look at Vietnam. Regardless of the winner or the losers, if you had the currency, you would lose your value. But if you had gold, or if you had silver, you can go to any country and it will have value. Sure. So as confidence being lost for whatever reason, this is really good.
Okay. And talking of confidence, you've chosen to come to Singapore and set up your business here. Why is that?
I did 2 trips around the world. I lived about 12 years in the United States. I know the United States very well. My education is all American. I'm originally German. I grew up in Italy. I worked in Germany for 2 years prior to coming here. And I believe that throughout the West, in Germany, in Europe in general, as well as in the United States, we are paying into a system which is basically bankrupt. It's just that most people don't realize this. But there's been no money saved for the pensions, for the healthcare promises, and so on and so on. These unfunded liabilities, there is no money saved. We should have a lot of money right now to pay for the retirees, the baby boomers in the US, and so on. You know, the promise we made to them, we should be awash in cash. Instead, the United States has a 1.6 trillion deficit right now. So there's going to be a lot of pain and hurt because a lot of people are not going to get the pension. Or they're going to get pension paid in dollars or euros. It's going to pay less and less and less. Either way, the real value of your pension won't be saved.
Okay.
And if I work in Germany, most of my money, I end up with a taxation which once you count in the employer portion of it, ends up being 75%. And the little bit which remains, they can really make much savings with it. So I wanted to leave the system. I wanted to find a place where, what I like to say, where politicians do what's best for the country. What's best for the long term of the country, not what's best for the short term election.
And you felt that was Singapore?
I visited several countries. I read a book by Lee Kuan Yew, which is the father of Singapore, the prime minister for a very long time. And the book is like an instruction manual on how to build a successful state.
Okay.
And every major law, whether it's a retirement system, whether it's the welfare system, or lack thereof, or the importance of education, and so on and so on. Everything in there is very well reasoned, it's very well thought out. And as Lee Kuan Yew likes to say, he wants to be correct, not politically correct. Okay. And because of this, Singapore today is very wealthy. It went from a third world country to a first world country. With a net income which, to my understanding, is higher than the US income. with a standard of living which is the highest in the world. A little tiny country which controls disproportionately much throughout the world, which is very safe, and which is multicultural in a way which is beyond belief. I mean, you have 700 square kilometers, you have 4 major ethnic groups, you have 6 official religions, you have 4 languages, about a quarter of people are foreigners. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be whatever you want to be here.
Okay.
And it is a place where entrepreneurs can do really well.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting, Gregor. Perhaps we could take a seat in the office and then you could explain why should an international investor feel confident in Singapore.
Yes.
Gregor, I met you a few years ago when you were just starting up this business, doing silver dealership in Singapore. In order to have done that, you need to have made some sort of mental move in terms of questioning what is money, what is the concept of money. When was that point for you?
Well, what happened to me, I've been my whole life in finance and in software development.
Right.
Back in 2008, I was working on compliance systems for some major banks in Germany, in Frankfurt. And I've lived for a very long time in the US, 12 years, my education is American. I've lived worked in Germany and in Italy. And it became very clear over the years that we are having huge amount of debts in these countries, that we won't be able to finance these. And as I was in Frankfurt, silver started going down in price to about 950 or so. And I was interested in silver because it seemed something which, as we print more and more money, US dollars and euros, especially US dollars, it was something which you can just print, and there isn't that much of it. So I did all this research, and it seemed like a good thing to buy. Since the price went down and down, I said, okay, great, I'm gonna go buy some parts of silver, and I'm gonna see, keep some home, I'm gonna be the owner, I'm not gonna be a creditor to another institution, which is what you are when you buy a financial instrument. You want to be the owner. So I went and I looked, and I ended up going to many different banks in Frankfurt area, bullion dealerships, and now some were selling me silver, physical. So all said, we only buy.
Right.
And then I said, well, okay, but are we supposed to have a market which says that this is worth 950, and isn't a price supposed to be in the middle between demand and supply, and shouldn't I be able to get my silver for 950?
So the very sort of basics of economics.
Yes, but it didn't work. There wasn't any silver. And then I realized that, after some research, that the silver market, most of it is financial, there's so much leverage like in the entire market. There really isn't much physical there.
Okay.
Same with gold, but especially with silver. And since I couldn't get this, I kept on looking for 1.5 months. I finally, in the gift shop of the ECB, the European Central Bank, I found a person, the director, said, I can give you a silver bar, I can get you one, come back in 2 days. He got me a Herreros 1 kg silver bar. I paid my 19% GST or tax, VAT in Europe, and I got it. But what that told me is that there is only so much silver out there.
Sure.
And just because the price goes down doesn't mean you can get physical.
Okay.
Then as we went more and more into what money is, realizing how much we are printing and how little control we have over what's really happening, it suddenly made a lot of sense to buy something like silver and gold, to buy something physical. So 2008 was the moment where I said, I want to own physical silver. I don't want to own paper silver, because if I want to protect myself from the printing of too much currency, then it doesn't make sense for me to buy a paper silver, which by itself can be created at infinitum because there's no real backing behind it.
Sure.
There's a tiny percentage, as more demand goes, they just create more liabilities. So that's when, for me, the
question of money became very real. And even though before that I knew theoretically how it was, or I thought I knew, it was a switch which caused me to say,
Okay, so it was the contrast of how much plentiful currency there was being created versus the limited amount of silver in circulation.
If you look at the Federal Reserve, my understanding is they printed about almost twice as much money in the last 3 years, 4 years, than they did in the whole 80 years before. It was just
incredible
currency that was created. And you know, as Ben Bernanke said himself, they can create this at no cost.
Sure.
When they need a couple of trillions, they just kind of type something in the computer and there it is. But as you create more currency, you're devaluing the currency which is already in the system.
Okay.
And that seems closely unfair. So buying something as old in a way as physical silver, it has a wonderful property, which is that it's rare and you can just create it out of nowhere.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And the backdrop for your story is the 2008 crisis. It's 4 years now since that took place, and yet there's still this sense that, by and large, the economy has stalled. That there hasn't really been any real progress in the last 4 years, maybe even a little bit further back than that. What is your explanation for the economy stalling for so long?
Well, most of the economic growth of the last decade in the Western world has been financed with debt. I mean, you look at the US consumers, they've been ranking up credit card debt. For some years we had a negative savings rate, meaning nobody saved in the US. I mean, on average, it was negative. So you can only borrow so much money for so long. At some point, you can no longer keep on borrowing. And so as you reduce your borrowing, you have to start saving a little bit, things kind of slow down. That's one aspect of it. The second part, in my opinion, has something to do with confidence in the whole company, because I think more and more people are starting to realize that we do not, so much of what we do is based on debt.
Okay.
Our pensions are based on a promise for which we have no savings.
Sure.
So, having spent so much in the past, you know, more people are starting to realize that where is the money from our future going to come on? Does the government really have that money? You're now seeing one bank which went bankrupt, and Lehman Brothers. They followed out of this, and then the government responds to basically create trillions of dollars and bail out other banks. You know, and as this kept on going, people are wondering, if so much money is being created, so much money is being given to these banks, you know, what about my retirement money? And if you take somebody like Ron Paul, the US Senator, he made a very clear statement. He said, you know, we'll keep on paying you your retirement, you will always get your check. But what you're going to be able to buy with that check is a different issue.
Sure.
Because, you know, if you're getting $1,000 and we printed, you know, 4 times as much in the last 2 years, then your purchasing power will not be what it was in the past.
Sure. So in effect, what you're saying is that there's a great deal of illusionary wealth previous to the crash that only really existed in our minds. Is that fair?
Yes. I was in Southern California just before the 2006, 2007, before the big fallout, and everybody and their dog wanted to become a real estate agent.
Right. I remember those days.
You know, we had liar loans.
Yep.
You know what those are? Basically, they took a bum off the street, combed his hair, put him in a suit, brought them to a bank, you know, and the bank would give him a loan of $500,000 or whatever, and they would tell him, if you give us evidence of your income and so on, you know, your job and so on, then we'll give you a lower interest rate, say 4%, if you cannot provide us with this, then we'll give you interest rate of 6%. And obviously, anybody who can prove that they have that income will just show that he has it. So these were informally called liar loans because ultimately everybody knew that the person probably is making some claims which are not there. And it was a bank or a financial institution should not be doing this because it would be a bad loan, but it was not a problem for them because they can just take that and package it into some derivatives and sell it off to somebody else.
Sure.
And that went on and on. So the real estate agent, he made his commission. The bum, he got a house. The bank made a bunch of money out of it and sold the risk to somebody else. Iceland, Germany,
Okay.
and so on and so on. So what happened during this time were excesses of the worst kind.
Okay. All right. And you talked about the easiness with which credit and money is just created, which brings us back to this question of what is money in the first place. So, simply put, is gold money?
It depends on what your definition of money is. Now, an economist has one definition. An average person, wanting to buy some coffee has a different definition.
Sure.
So, from an economist's point of view, or a more technical one, I would argue that yes, it is money, because it does have a currency symbol, just like silver does.
Yeah.
And it is a store of value, and it fulfills also prerequisites for what commonly is understood to be money. Throughout history, it's been our standard way of exchanging along with silver for 5,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
However, right now you cannot go to a Starbucks or to a coffee place,
Okay.
give them 4 grams of money and expect to get a cappuccino because they wouldn't know what to do with it. So if you're looking at it from the layman sort of, can I buy a coffee with it? Right now the answer is no, you have to exchange it for something else.
Sure.
But it is a store of value, and it is a store of value which has a very important characteristic of money, which is that it is a finite resource.
That's true. That's very true. And talking of finite resources, what about silver? Is silver money?
If gold is money, silver is money. I mean, the two are interchangeable throughout history. At least before the 20th century, silver played a more important role than gold for the most part.
True.
When it comes to the US dollar is based on silver. The original US dollar. The Canadian dollar is based on silver.
The British pound originally was based on
British
silver.
pound, the German thaler, the South American currencies were all based on Portuguese or the Spanish Empire were all based on the piece of 8.
Yes.
Most people don't realize even the Chinese yuan of 1913, the modern one, is based on the 1 ounce piece of 8.
Sure.
So silver was really a very, very important monetary tool, more so than gold.
Absolutely. I've recently been researching about the Commission of International Exchange, in which the British and the Americans went out and tried to convince the populations of the Third World that silver wasn't money, and successfully did so. Probably a sad episode in history, in that these people were robbed of purchasing power. Which brings us on to the question of money playing a role in international context. Which country in the world, or currency, are you most concerned about?
I would say the US dollar.
Okay, why is that?
Because the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the currency which had the most reckless printing. As Jim Rogers says, they say they've already printed so much, there are no more trees left, even so they don't need to print it physically anymore. But we created so much currency in the last 4 or 5 years, and there is no real sign that this is going to be changed, and it affects
if anything, it's speeding up.
Yes. And so much is already created, and the US has so much debt. Right now, the United States has a budget deficit of about 1.6 trillion per year. To put that in context, the US gold reserves are about 250 million ounces, more or less, somewhere around there, according to footnotes officially. If you take the current price of gold at about $1,650, you end somewhere with 420 billion US dollars.
Assuming they've got all of it.
Yes, but $420 billion is not much. That's a bit more than 3 months of deficits at current levels.
That is
Yes, so basically there is no. I mean, we've created so much paper money, and there's so little physical left. There's almost no silver left in the US because that was spent, sold, dumped almost over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
The gold likely is still there, but there's so little of it that it doesn't have much of a relevance in the current level. The current price is so low that it doesn't have much of economic relevance.
Okay, so Gregor, we were previously discussing on why Singapore is such a great country to do business in. Why should an international investor believe in putting their wealth in Singapore? Many of our viewers are concerned that there might be some sort of government seizure of wealth, such as happened in the US, 1933 with Roosevelt seizing the American citizens' gold. Why should Singapore be different?
Singapore is different because Singapore is a small island, 700 square kilometers, about over 4 million people, no natural resources. What makes Singapore what it is today, what makes it wealthy, is the ingenuity of the people,
Sure.
the trade, the intellectual capacity of the people, and ultimately, as Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore, said, it can all be narrowed down into one word. The word is confidence.
Okay.
If people come to Singapore because they know there's almost no corruption, they know that if there is a law, the law will be respected, and they know that Singapore has a history of not bending the laws to foreign entities, to foreign countries. If people lose confidence in Singapore, there won't be much left here.
Okay. And Singapore, are they pro investment in gold and silver? Have they made any moves with regards to encouraging international investors?
Yes, I believe Singapore has recognized that the confidence in the US dollar, the confidence in the euro, in other Western countries is starting to decrease. There's a greater demand for physical bullion.
Okay, and is that why they've set up Star Storage? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, Star Storage was developed as a way for both local and international investors to store bullion in Singapore in a very transparent way, and in a way whereby you don't own a generic amount of bullion and you don't own a portion of a bar. Instead, you own a parcel which is inventorized at the vault, Singapore Freeport, and it will typically be a monster box, 500 eagles, 500 leaves, or 5 JM bars, 500 ounces worth of silver bars or gold. And it will be packaged, it will have a unique ID. And when you buy the bullion, you are not a creditor to silver bullion, but you become the owner through a tax invoice of the actual parcel. And whenever you want to take delivery of the parcel, you can take delivery. If you want to sell it back to us, we act as your agent to actually buy it back from you. So it is a storage system which has many redundancies. We show all parcels in the vault to everybody as a matter of transparency. Of course, the owners have anonymous ID so that your details are protected.
And this is a service that you provide at your own company, silverbullion.com.sg.
Yes, it is, and it was developed for the investor who wants to own physical, wants to own it in a safe jurisdiction and wants to make sure it's there. Among other things, we provide you with a photo of each parcel, your own parcel, so you know the bullion is there. And you also get an inventory statement from the vault itself, as well as our statement, as well as LBMA, London Bullion Market Association approved inspection company, which comes in, as well as a trustee, which also does inspection. So we have 2 or 3 levels of double checks and crossovers into one within the system.
So it's the security that you provide that is your advantage.
It is the transparency and the knowledge that you own physical bullion, and not just any type of bullion, but it is physically there and it's your parcel and you can take delivery of it.
Sure.
So that what makes a difference. You don't own a generic amount.
Yeah.
It is not just allocated, it is reserved for you.
And Singapore government seem rather keen on getting people to invest in silver and gold bullion in Singapore. Indeed, I believe that there's some tax incentives to do so.
Yes, we have worked with Singapore IE, which is a Singapore branch which advises the Ministry of Trade here on what sort of new laws to do. But what Singapore decided to do is to basically exempt gold and silver from any sort of taxation.
Right.
There is
0%.
There is no taxation at all.
Wow.
Singapore does not have a capital gain tax anyway. But there used to be sales tax on bullion. That's being removed. Now, Star Storage is not affected on it because it's in a bonded warehouse, so there was never any taxation on it anyway. But the removal of the taxation means you can bring bullion into Singapore, you can take it out very easily, so there's no taxation. So you can actually come to Singapore and do your own storage. You can go, you can get a safe deposit box, you put your bullion in here, and we have about 30,000 safe deposit boxes just 50 meters from where we are in San Francisco, which is an auxiliary police unit of the in Singapore.
One of the safest places in Singapore, which by itself is a very safe place.
One of the safest places in the world.
Yes, and there's no reporting to foreign countries about this.
Right. And talking of foreign countries, if you're not paying any sales tax in the first place, and then you're not paying any capital gains tax, well, then we're talking about a really significant amount of tax saving compared to a country such as Germany, UK, US.
Yes, I would say maybe 30–40%
Wow.
are international investors. 60% are Singaporeans. I believe that once GST or the sales tax is being removed,
Yes.
there will be a big inflow of people who want to buy, sell, trade, and Singapore is trying to encourage this. Singapore has decided strategically that they want to become a gold and silver trading hub.
And these people who do own silver, earlier we were discussing a shift in the monetary system, which may well include gold and may well include silver at some point in the future. Now, for our viewers, could you give us some kind of idea of what sort of purchasing power you would imagine gold and silver to have if that were to be the case?
Well, it's very hard to know what that might be. I like to look at the fundamentals of things. I mean, and I can give you a couple of figures which don't. I mean, if you take the current amount of official debt that the United States has, and you take against it the amount of ounces that the United States has, then each ounce of gold should be about $65,000 US.
Wow.
If you take the unfunded liabilities, which is also money that the US is supposed to pay for the pensions and their healthcare benefits that they're supposed to be paying out, which they don't have today.
Which sits at about 120 trillion.
Yeah, depending on figures, so 114, 120. It depends on how long you think people are going to live and so on. So they're all estimates, but
somewhere above 100 trillion, likely. Well, then, you know, you look at how much gold the US has, and you're looking at $450,000.
$450,000.
Yes, will it be so
In
much?
order to cover that.
Here's the point. I think the question is not so much how much is gold going to go up, it's how much is the currency going to
Yes.
decline.
Yes.
That is the question.
And that's the mental leap that many people are still to make.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Gregor, it's been a fantastic interview with you. I hope our listeners have enjoyed watching this, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.